Good morning. Before I offer the words for our call to worship, I have three brief announcements. The first is that in an effort to reduce the environmental impact of all of the masks that we have been wearing recently, our social action team here at Cedars has partnered with the Zero Waste Program and will be collecting these disposable masks in this bucket as you leave the Island School today. If you have a mask that is ready to be passed on, please feel free to drop it in here and we'll make sure that it gets to the appropriate place to be recycled and taken care of so it doesn't end up in our landfills. Also, outside of the Cedars Center in Winslow, we will be placing a box where folks in the community and Cedars in general are welcome to stop by and to drop off masks. So we'll be collecting them there as well and encouraging people from around the community to come and help save our planet by collecting the masks. The second is that we are almost at the point in our church year where we hold our annual stewardship drive. This year, the focus on the drive is about rebuilding connections with each other, and as part of that, after the service today, members of the stewardship committee will be just outside here of Webster Hall taking photos of members and friends of the congregation to share among us and to include in some of our materials. And so if you would like to participate in that, I'd encourage you after the service to take a moment to head outside and to have your picture taken. The final announcement is some of you may know that we have a fundraiser going on right now at Cedars. We are selling these car magnets, or they're also good for your refrigerator or dishwasher or any other surface that magnets stick to, with the Cedars logo and name on them. These magnets are available after the service. They'll be out, Jane Martin, I believe, in the back will be out in the hallway here. And you can purchase one of these magnets for a donation of $25. And your generosity in this fundraiser, as always, is greatly appreciated. So that's enough business. The words for our call to worship come from the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker. The beauty of life is such that it will not let us go until we have offered the blessing we have to give. So let the beauty we have seen become the good that we do. And let us not rest ourselves free from the claim that life places upon us until we, in faith, with all those who have gone before us, place ourselves among those who bless the world. As we come together this morning, may we pause and in our gathering work to place ourselves among those who bless the world. Come, let us worship together.
Among the many issues our world experiences, not all can be dealt with in merely one generation, if one is to do so peacefully, that is. In fact, most take many generations of people working their whole lives to make their world a better place for the next generation to come. In the case of climate change, an issue my generation is very concerned with, people have known for over 40 years that some of the common items, materials, and products we use are harmful to the planet. The people of the first generation to advocate for better care of the environment were classified as hippies or ridiculous young people. They were not taken seriously by the general population. The next generation of people were not so much better off. By the time the 2000s and Al Gore's The Inconvenient Truth came around, there were still not many people who believed climate change was a problem, or at least as big of a problem as it really was. Since the turn of the century and another generation, Gen Z this time, and the increasing number of climate disasters that have occurred, it has become impossible to factually deny that climate change is wreaking havoc on our planet and its species, including Homo sapiens. Thanks to the work of generations, we finally have solutions to climate change that could save our planet's species and preserve our one and only Earth, the only planet known to harbor life. The challenge my generation, Gen Z, is taking on is not only to create and refine plausible ways to counteract climate change, but to get people, those in government and those who hold executive power, to accept and implement these plans. There are those who would say that Gen Z will be the world's downfall, that we are too preoccupied with our phones and social media. To them, we are the lazy generation who will sit back and bury ourselves in technology while the world around us grows steadily less recognizable. But I believe that Gen Z will do exactly the opposite. While, yes, there are negative effects of social media, far from hiding ourselves from the world, I choose to believe that technology will be the medium through which we will most able to influence the world. It empowers the ordinary to communicate across the globe, to send messages loud and clear, to save the planet for our children. So you might be wondering why I'm telling you this. Why is this relevant to today's topic? As Carl Sagan said in his Pale Blue Dot speech, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The point of all this is that with any issue that is so broad, so insurmountable, it takes generations of people to slowly bring the world around. So when the pivotal generation, as many believe Gen Z will be, comes along to save us from ourselves and change the world is ready to be changed. So I dedicate the lighting of this chalice to the success of generations past, who have prepared our world for the change it needs to experience, and those who continue to change the world for the better today. Please repeat after me the chalice lighting as written in the order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
Whenever I've been traveling to a new city, a feature of many cities that I find really interesting is how when you go to some older cities, you can go and see the ruins or the remains of the first buildings that were built. I think of if you've ever been to Seattle and maybe gone on the underground tour, and you can see where the street level used to be, and some of the rooms and actual spaces that exist underneath the city today. Or I know I recently learned that in Rome, for instance, one of the reasons that they are having such a hard time trying to do any public transportation has to do with the fact of every time they try to dig a tunnel, they hit some ancient remains of former inhabitants. A few years ago, when I was in Budapest visiting some of the Unitarian churches in that part of the world, I got to spend about a week in the city of Budapest, which has a very ancient history. And one side of the city, the Buda side, the uphill side, has old palaces that are about 1,000 years old, and some of them are newer, but they were built over many centuries ago. And still, these ancient buildings, if you go underneath them, you will find a system of carved out caves that are the evidence of people who lived there even before these ancient buildings were built. People, I think, are kind of like this. We are like a city that is built upon a city that is built upon a city. Perhaps if you've ever seen the Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, and there's the king who's trying to marry off his prince, and he builds a castle, and that castle sinks into the swamp. And so he builds another castle, and that castle falls down or burns down and then sinks into the swamp. So he builds a third castle, and he tells his son, "You are getting the finest castle ever. It's not going to sink into the swamp this time." People are like this. In our contemporary lives, we are building upon the foundations of generations of people who came before us. Each new generation takes up the struggles that we've inherited, the challenges, and the good things that we've inherited. And we must, in turn, decide what we will build with those things. What will we build with the things that we have inherited? What inheritance will we leave for those who come after us? In what direction is the future of humanity building? We'll explore this a bit more in our sermon in a while, but now I'd invite Brennan to please play our musical interlude. Please join me in a spirit of prayerful reflection as I share these words by Marjorie Bowen Wheatley and Clyde Grubbs. The road of history is long, full of both hope and disappointment. In times past, there have been wars and rumors of wars, violence and exploitation, hunger, homelessness, and destruction of this earth, your creation. We have become a global village with a growing realization of how fragile this earth is and how interconnected we are to each other and to all of creation. We cannot continue to live in the old way. We must make a change, see a new way, a way toward peace with justice and a healthy planet. O great creative Spirit, you have given a vision of the good, and we yearn for a new way. But where are we to find the courage to begin this work? We know that a different tomorrow is possible, but how can we build it? We think of the prophets, women and men, who voiced unpopular opinions, who made personal sacrifices, and sometimes lost their lives for the sake of justice. We think of Isaiah, who called out to let those who are held captive go free, to give solace to the poor and homeless. Let us be inspired by all who work to overcome misery, poverty, and exploitation. We think of Harriet Tubman, who called out to people of goodwill to join her on the Underground Railroad, to lift a dehumanized people from the bondage of slavery to the promise of freedom, to even when it meant challenging unjust laws. Let us be inspired by those who are outlaws for freedom. We think of Gandhi, whose belief in soul force, the witness to love's truth, helped to overthrow the oppression of an empire and gave witness to the way of nonviolent action. Let us be inspired to become a witness for peace. We think of Chief Seattle, who reminded us that we belong to the earth, not the earth to us. Let us be inspired by all those who work for healing of creation, of all of Mother Earth and all her creatures. Who are the prophets who inspire you? They may be well known or known only by you, offering personal inspiration, courage, and hope. May they join a great cloud of witnesses to a new way of life, the way of peace and justice, the way of justice lived according to the way of peace, the beloved community. This time, I would like to invite us into a moment of silence together. Since the new year, our community has had members go before us to join with that cloud of witnesses, those prophets who still call us to our highest values, people near and dear to us. People like Pat Sampson, Diana Peters, Reverend Jean Pupke. At this time, let us hold them and all those who remain unnamed in this space, hoping that their memory may be an inspiration to us. May the spirit of those who have gone before us, our dearly departed, remain with us, inspiring us on our journey ahead. Amen. So I want to start with a quote. And some of the language of the quote is a little bit dated, but that's not the point. This quote says, "Compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us with firm and cheerful trust endure all trials, discharge all duties, accept all sacrifices, fulfill the law of universal and impartial love, and adopt as our own that cause of truth." This quote from Unitarian minister Reverend William Ellery Channing, the man who's actually credited with coining the term Unitarian as we use it today, serves as a reminder of how the spirits of past generations, our ancestors, can continue to shape the present reality, helping to bolster us up as we journey in the direction of beloved community. Or at least that's how I choose to understand this quote. Compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us with firm and cheerful trust endure all trials, discharge all duties, accept all sacrifice, fulfill the law of universal and impartial love. I interpret this quote the way that I do because Channing is referencing is making use of the phrase "cloud of witnesses." It's a phrase that also came up in the prayer I offered a moment ago. This particular phrase comes from a passage in the Christian scriptures, specifically Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, which states, "Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." In both this passage of Scripture and the quote from Channing, the idea of being surrounded or compassed about by such a cloud of witnesses seems to have the power to imbue an endurance upon all those who find themselves in the midst of such a great and wonderful cloud. But who are these witnesses, this cloud of witnesses? And why is it that so many people, so many of our ancestors throughout the centuries have found solace in the thought of being enfolded, penetrated, guarded, guided, kept by the power who can never forsake us? That's the end of the quote that Channing offers. To be enfolded, penetrated, guarded, guided, kept by the power who can never forsake us. We'll come back to the cloud of witnesses, but now I want to turn our attention to an article titled New Bones: Abolitionism, Communism, and Captive Maternal Writers by James Joyce. Joy James. In this article, James uses Lucille Clifton's poem, New Bones, as a means of commentary on the contemporary struggles for racial liberation in the United States. In this article, James writes that new bones grow out of the political cultures of material struggles. That new bones grow out of the material circumstances, the political circumstances of our life. So I find James's use of this particular poem to be an interesting springboard for the article's broader point about the interconnection of Black liberation movements throughout U.S. history. I find it particularly interesting, especially since James spends very little time actually examining the text of the poem. Rather, what Joy James seems to do is to use the poem as a thematic lens. But before I say more, I suppose that all of you might like to hear the poem. So here it is. New Bones. New bones. We will wear new bones again. We will leave these rainy days, break through another mouth into sun and honey time. Worlds buzz over us like bees. We be splendid in new bones. Other people think they know how long life is. We know. Other people think they know how long life is. We know. The poet of this poem, Lucille Clifton, was born Thelma Louise Sales on June 27th, 1936, in Depew, New York. She graduated high school in 1953 and attended Howard University before later transferring to one of the state universities in New York. At the time that Lucille began really writing her poetry, American society was going through some significant cultural upheavals. In this particular case, she began writing in the early and mid-60s. So I'm referring to the civil rights movement, the Black liberation movements that had begun to spring up around the country, Black Panthers and the like. Even in our own Unitarian Universalist Association, there were struggles for Black liberation. This period of the 1960s and 70s, this period that we refer to as the civil rights era, serves as the backdrop for many of Lucille's early poems. Many have speculated that this poem, New Bones, specifically, is one such poem from this period. This poem does not explore any specific scene or situation. It's not an experience that Lucille is narrating to us, but rather is a poem that embodies a spirit of certainty, speaking of a time when we will wear new bones again, a time of rebirth and triumph over what she names as these rainy days. Lucille Clifton's work emphasizes the endurance and strength through adversity. She tends to focus particularly on the African American experience and family life. Such an insight can be confirmed by looking at Lucille's poems themselves. In another untitled poem that Lucille published, she writes, "Harriet, if I be you, let me not forget to be the pistol pointed, to be the madwoman at the river's edge, warning, be free or die. And Isabel, if I be you, let me in my sojourning not forget to ask my brothers, ain't I a woman too? And grandmother, if I be you, let me not forget to work hard, trust the gods, love my children, and wait." In this untitled poem, Clifton weaves together the collective struggle for liberation experienced by generations of Black women, including herself. Both of these poems, New Bones and the untitled poem, were published in 1974 in Lucille Clifton's first book of poetry titled An Ordinary Woman. It also just so happens that these two poems appear on the page opposite of each other. I have no idea if this placement was intentional. I don't know if whoever was editing the book said these poems need to go together, or if Lucille herself said these poems belong next to each other. But as I see them in the book nestled together, however they got there, I can't help but start drawing a causal relationship between the two poems. What I mean by this has to do with the content of the untitled poem. In this poem, Clifton names three women: Harriet, Isabel, and grandmother. The first is a reference to Harriet Tubman, rabble-rouser and conductor of the Underground Railroad. She was an enslaved woman who emancipated herself and committed herself to the work of liberating others. The second name refers to Isabel Baumfree, or Sojourner Truth, who we heard about last Sunday. And the third woman, named Grandmother, is not identified as any person in particular. Perhaps it's meant to be the speaker or Lucille's grandmother, or perhaps it's meant to be read as a broader archetypal figure of the grandmother. I think either reading works for the point I'm trying to make, however. In this poem, the speaker addresses each of these personalities directly. The tone of this address feels both reverential and informal. It's as if the speaker knows these women personally and feels present to them as she speaks. I think that's the reason I want to, in my own mind, link these two poems together. To me, it feels as if these women are the collective we that Clifton refers to when she writes, "Other people think they know how long life is. We know." This way of situating the poems next to each other provides additional commentary. It adds some depth. This positioning of the text as such also has a similar effect to how Joy James chose to make use of the poem New Bones in her own commentary on Black liberation movements. She does this, sun's in my eye. She does this by, at the beginning of her article, placing the poem as the sort of the beginning text. Interestingly, as I mentioned, she doesn't come back and really analyze the poem, but seems to place it there as a way of us, providing us a tool to use to interpret the article itself. Throughout the article, Joy James explores Clifton's poem as a framework for understanding the histories of resilience and resistance that undergirds the struggle for Black liberation in the United States. James writes, Black poet, educator, and parent Lucille Clifton's New Bones shapes skeletal reflections on revolutionary anniversaries. James goes on to name a series of Black liberation movements, both in the U.S. and around the world, and connects them in a way that brings us into the present moment. In this case, the article was written in early 2021, and so it covers many of the incidents that happened around our country following the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others. At one point, Joy James states that liberation movements seek to align in solidarity, or she advocates that they should seek to align in solidarity. And I believe that that is what she is trying to do by making use of Clifton's poem as a springboard for her article. She is attempting to align her own struggle for liberation as she understands it with that of Lucille Clifton and the generations who have come before. For Joy James, the model for understanding the progression of such liberation movements is found by situating her own understanding into the larger historic context of Black liberation. And Lucille Clifton's poem, New Bones, serves as a vehicle for that understanding. So what does this have to do with the point that I made about cloud of witnesses, the cloud of witnesses that we started with? What is the connection? So I don't know about all of you, but there is something about knowing that I am not the only one going through a hard time or struggling with something in life that gives me a little bit of comfort. It's not that I enjoy that other people are struggling. It's not that I want to look out in the world and say, oh, wow, they're having a hard time too. But when I see that other people are in a similar place, it allows me to feel as if what I'm going through is not unique to me. That what I'm going through, it's not special. It's not just because I'm Zachary. It's something about the human condition. The joys and sorrows that we experience are just part of what it means to be alive, and to be reminded that other people also experience these joys and sorrows helps to ground me in my own humanity. I think it's this reality, this way of sort of, one friend sometimes calls it trauma bonding. It's like people who are going through a hard time oftentimes seek out support groups. We want other people in our life who are going through similar things. When we're facing death in our family, or perhaps our own death, when we're facing illness or struggling with addiction or any number of other things, we tend to go places to be with other people who are sharing that struggle. We draw support on that. There's something about having a chance to share our experience and to have it mirrored back to us, or at least held in a way that feels relatable, that it seems to bring us together, to make it seem like things are possible. For me, connecting with other people around a struggle or triumph has always been a way of affirming the experience I'm going through. It's as if such sharing allows me to see myself in someone else. But it's bigger than just the interpersonal. I have similar feelings when I think about where we as a species are in relation to those who lived before us. We are not the first generation of people on this planet who have gone through a hard time. We're not the first generation to have gone through a pandemic. We're not the first generation to have faced political unrest or to face racism, to face poverty, or any number of other issues. We have generations of ancestors whose wisdom, experience, and tenacity are there like a well of inspiration for us to draw upon. We simply need to take the time to locate ourselves in, as Rebecca Parker says, in faith with all those who have gone before us, to place ourselves among those who have blessed the world. Perhaps that's the wisdom that Lucille Clifton has to offer us. A reminder to place ourselves in line with those that have gone before us. Place ourselves among those who have blessed the world. To do this is to surround ourselves in the midst of that great cloud of witnesses and allow our current material and political situation to unfold, informed and guided by the wisdom of those who came before, by the wisdom of our ancestors. As Lucille Clifton was nearing her death in 2010, she was asked in an interview how she would like to be remembered. To this question, she replied, "I would like to be seen as a woman whose roots go back to Africa, who tried to honor being human. My inclination is to try to help." Even as she was nearing her own death, Lucille Clifton insisted that she be located in the line of ancestors that brought her into the world, and upon exiting the world, joined in faith with all those who have gone before her, to the glory of life.
Please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. As we go forth today, may we pause and take the time to situate ourselves in that great chain of life that stretches through eternity. May it be so.